The following is an original audio series from Sierra International Machinery, Pile of Scrap, with your host, John Sacco.
Good morning, everyone. How we doing? Good. All right, you guys didn't overdo it last night. We can see with all the smiling faces, except for the troublemakers in the back, right? We know who did too much last night. They're the ones in the back. Well, first of all, thank you, Jack, Jay, the brothers, for allowing me to come here, Michael, for letting me come here to have a talk with the brothers Goldstein. It's an honor and privilege to be here. Congratulations, gentlemen, on 125 years. An incredible feat. You have an incredible company. I've gotten to know a lot of people over the last few years, and all I can say is this is a big company that acts like a small family business. No bullies here. People truly trying to work with each other, and it's your leadership that got us there. So congratulations. So let's get started here. We got the brothers. We got Jeff, the oldest. Rob, you're the middle. Rich, you're the youngest. So I got to know right off the bat, growing up in the Goldstein family, Jeff, were your brothers crash test dummies or punching bags? Which one was it?
Crash test dummies.
Rob, a story?
I remember my father decided it was time for us to learn how to drive something. And we were on the great trip west with the family, all in a station wagon, and off we go to California. First stop was Consolidation Bluffs. So they said, let's let you guys drive. So they put me in a car, they put him in a truck. And we're driving around the yard. It's like on a Saturday morning or a Sunday. The yard was empty. And I found myself playing chicken with Jeff. And I'm like, now wait a minute, you're in a big freaking truck. And my car's barely starting, barely moving. So
didn't you hear crash test dummy?
He missed me. I got out of the way. Not by much.
You're here today. Rich, how about you? What a story about big brothers here. You're the last one there.
Well, what was nice was they helped break in the parents.
They softened them up for you.
Yeah, exactly. So the parents, by the time I came around, and again, they saved the best for last, they knew what to expect.
That's more true than you know.
Yeah. It's hard to teach parents.
Yes.
Fantastic. All right, gentlemen, earliest memories. What's your first memory, each of you, your first memory of walking into one of your facilities? The recycling yard, the scrap yard, the junk yard back in the days, which we don't use that terminology anymore, but back when you were growing up, that's what they were calling it. So give us your first memory. We'll start with you, Rich.
So at age 13, I was in the non-ferrous warehouse in Davenport sorting brass and learning from a guy named Smitty how to smell brass. Of course, you can't smell brass, but I still remember putting the brass on the grinder to see if it was yellow or red, and hurting my little finger. I mean, it's one of those things. But I learned well, and I do have to make a call out. She's not here, but at age 14, I was working with Alice Lake, and up in the office, and she was great at having me reconcile checks.
Rob?
I guess I remember as maybe 5-6 years old, getting to drive through the yard and looking at it like that. But it used to be in the summer, again, 13, big brother was 15 at the time. And we'd paint stuff, we were painting boxes. I remember I put bricks inside of an afterburner one time, but after spending a whole day in this tank, they rolled it up the hatch so I could get out, and all the bricks fell on me.
Oh, there you go.
But every time we would come back home, Jeff and I walking through the yard, there's a puddle. Of course, he would walk through the water that was like an inch deep. I was like down to my knee every time. My mother would look at us. So he's coming home clean. I had to take my clothes off outside.
You're the reason there's a mudroom in the house.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely.
Jeff?
Well, I also started in the Davenport non-ferrous at about 14, and I was the first, so my dad said, well, I'm going to pay you to work here. You're getting half a minimum wage. I said, why is that? He says, because I'm already giving you room and board. So
I had that too.
Yeah. So my earliest, I did share because growing up as myself in a metal recycling facility, the first piece of equipment I ever operated was a broom. Then the next one was a little handheld magnet. And when my dad put me in non-ferrous and the magnet didn't stick, I was like, what am I here for? If the magnet doesn't stick, I'm not having fun. Then I learned quickly that the non-ferrous was far more valuable. All right, so, dads have, big influence on our lives, right? But sometimes we don't listen to our parents as much as we should, but there's always that mentor. Who was your mentor? Jeff, we'll start with you. Who was your mentor growing up and going to the yards?
I'd say early on it was Chuck Smith. Chuck Smith was a great guy. Many of you here may remember him, and he just had such a soft touch about him, but he could get everything done. In fact, I'd heard him described as the velvet glove around Bernie's iron fist. That kind of guy. That kind of guy. Special person, knew how to talk to anybody and make them feel good.
And what was your takeaway from him? So is how he interacted with people?
I learned a lot about how to interact with people, exactly. And I've said it many times that in the scrap yard is where I really learned how to deal with people. Because you don't know if that person walking in the door owns a multi-million-dollar corporation kicking out stampings, or if it's some guy with a pickup truck. Don't underestimate the guy in a pickup truck, because the Wall Street Journal's sitting on the bench next to him, right? And that taught me respect everybody, because you don't know where it's going to go.
Rob?
Well, in addition, of course, to our parents, there was a guy in charge of the Davenport yard named John Doolin. Eventually, he went to lead Samuels, and so we had an old Harris 3000 baler. It was put in like in '59, so you can imagine the oil leaks that are around there. And he'd try and send a crew down in there to clean it up, and he'd get nothing but pushback all the time. So this guy goes down to Salvation Army, buys a suit for maybe $5, $10, and he comes into the yard. He tells the guy wearing the suit, "Come on, guys, you got to clean that up." "Well, we don't want to do that." He's like, bump, 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 and he jumped in the middle of the oil in his suit, and these people were all like, "Oh my God, this Sunday best that he's doing this." And they all jumped in and helped, But Chuck Smith was an amazing guy, amazing mentor. He said, in this business, when you start, after 6 months, you're going to know everything. You'll know everything there is to know about the business, no question. At about 2 years, you'll think you got a pretty good idea still. And in 5 years, you'll know what you don't know. That's when you're finally a valuable employee,
Rich, your mentor?
Besides our parents, and Chuck Smith, somewhat, but I didn't have as close an interaction to Chuck as Rob and Jeff did. But I went to school in Des Moines and worked with Gary Backus and Bob Rosenkrantz at the yard during summers as well as a year after school, and they were wonderful early mentors. Bob spent a lot of time with me on Saturday mornings or running the scale at the time, and it was great. But I've had many mentors. I could go to the list over the course of the years of people in the company.
So you said you talk about school. So let's talk about education for your college. After high school, down the line. Where did you go to school?
I went to Drake in Des Moines.
Drake in Des Moines.
I came here to Tulane, and they really haven't emotionally left yet.
Have an attachment here. Jeff?
University of Pennsylvania.
Wow. That's impressive. Okay, so you're out of college now. You're going into the company. You're going to go work with the fam. What's your first job, Jeff? What did your dad or whoever said this is your first job? What was it?
Gosh, what was it?
You still waiting?
Yeah, still waiting. No, I was working. I spent time in the Davenport yard, mostly non-ferrous, some ferrous, and just learning my way around. And I beg your pardon. I just got married right out of school, and started work that summer. And my folks had a very good idea. They said, "You're newlyweds. You should not be here in Davenport. You should be either in Council Bluffs or St. Paul." And so I was sent off to work with Alan Levy up in St. Paul that first couple of years, and where I was out in the yard learning how to grade scrap, learning how to deal with the customers that were coming in and out, and then learning how to manage people, et cetera, et cetera. And second year was out calling on accounts. Third year we had a shredder going into Davenport and needed somebody to go out and call in auto wreckers. So that was my first 3 years.
Rob?
I was a lead man in the Davenport yard, and the shredder was just starting out. I remember we had 20,000 tons of bundles, and that was the 5-foot bundles out of that baler I was talking about. And first time I was with some of the guys, and we got these bales stacked everywhere. First explosion we had with the gas tank going through the shredder, all of us, we hit the dirt, and we're looking at each other like, what was that? But we were hiding behind this big wall of bales, so we were okay.
Yeah, thank God they didn't tumble on you. And Rich, how about you?
So I worked at the Des Moines yard, and my first job was calling on salvage yards and accounts. So the dress code back then was coat and tie. I mean, it didn't matter what you did. And I literally went to salvage yards, kicked chickens out of the way, and had to relate to the customers. And I was starting to say and yup and y'all. And I had no idea that later I would actually live in Birmingham and New Orleans, where y'all was like a real word. But it worked.
All right, so I'm going to go to you, Rob, on this one, since the brothers on the end seem to get the first question. Look, there's no doubt that 125 years, you have to have so many things working in the right way. And as I started this morning on the intro, is I know this company culture, I feel it, I've seen it, I've been around. Rob, how does the company culture from when you started, as it evolves, how did you get to know all of you, but Rob, to you first, is the recipe that created what I see here and what I feel here and what I saw last night and what you and Jack and Jay said this morning, how does that evolve? How did you do it?
Well, from an early age, our parents would drill things into us, which is what you want to do with your kids. They're emotionally pliable, and you can teach them something like sort of maybe before age 6 or 7. But it was always in a different manner as it was given to us. But the culture is about integrity. It's about honesty. It's about respect. Respect for one another, respect for the people that work for you or you work for, your customers. And in the end, it's about family. And I guess to sum it up, I always say, look, here's the deal. Your job is to take care of my family. My job is to take care of your family. And that's kind of how we do it. I'd like to tell you it's more high tech, but since I'm not Elon Musk, I can't dress it up that way.
Jeff, you want to add to that?
I agree.
There you go.
You agree that I'm not Elon Musk?
I agree. I have to add, we've been raised forever to teach people with respect, and have that feeling of everyone in this room is part of our family.
So, I'm second generation. I have a brother. My dad divvied up our duties, so we really didn't step over each other. And I think that's part of the success we've had. So how did your dad, did he really have a plan to put the brothers in places that the company needed, and then you all came together to report together, so that way you didn't step on each other? So what was his philosophy about the brothers and how you were going to work in the company? Anybody?
Well, he always wanted 3 legs to the stool. The scrap business, we were in the barge business, and then we were a small grain company, and looking for other things to invest in. And early on I started scrap, then I moved to the barge line, and then I ended up back in scrap. Jeff, I think, was the same way, opposite. And in the end, Jeff was running the barge company, and I think the grain company, and I had the scrap company, and Rich had new development. So I know Rich looked at a lot of things, like we just about built an ethanol plant. And the market changed, thankfully, before we broke ground. But so that's kind of how we're different areas, but we'd all come together. We had lunch usually at the Village Inn in Bettendorf, and we would talk about things and, work together.
So you all found your spot within the business and your passions. Jeff, the logistics in the barge became something that you became super passionate about. Tell us about, what was that moment? Did you have that moment that says, this is for me?
Well, I had a very steep learning curve because I grew up in the scrap business for 25 years, and then all of a sudden I'm managing the barge business because the fellow before me just kind of hit the end of his road and burned out. And it was one of those choices: do we keep this business or do we try and continue to make it work? And that's where I jumped in. And so I had an awful lot of teachers, and a lot of good teachers. They were all good people in that business, and enjoyed working with them. But like I said to a lot of folks, I mean, I don't know how to drive a towboat, but I know how to use a towboat. I understood that, and so and that's how that moved on. But I guess the best thing I did in the barge line business was sell the darn thing.
Do you miss it?
A little. I mean, about 6. It was one of those things where market forces came to, the stars lined up, and there was an opportunity after decades of too much equipment, low prices, low rates, et cetera, where everything popped up to be great, and the big driver was a flooding of coal mines in Australia, which drove the demand for coal in America to go overseas. Demand was like through the roof. Everybody needed barges, and we had new barges compared to everybody else. So we got some good offers. 6 months after that, guess what happened? The floods went away, market went back down. So timing was luck. Totally luck, and being at the right place at the right time. So, yeah, I do miss it some, but the fellow that bought the barge line from me, I saw him a year later, and I said, so are they still talking to you in your office?
So Rich, you yesterday as we were talking, you're the most geographic of the brothers in your movement. And New Orleans has a special place in your heart.
Yeah.
Tell us about it. Tell us about your movement and around and the places you were, and really what your places and your good memories are.
So when I was in Des Moines, Chuck Smith called me up one day and he said, "We need you up in St. Paul." Okay, to be an account executive. Okay, when? Yesterday. So a lot of notice. So I worked up there under a guy named George McGrath. It was great to see the scrapyard river terminal environment combination work together. And then from there I went to Birmingham, Alabama, where we had a brokerage office. Way back when we were the exclusive supplier to Bayou Steel. And my job was to help try to diversify a little bit. Later on, the Bayou Steel relationship, due to an acquisition of them, of the steel mill, changed. But so we closed our Birmingham office, and I moved to New Orleans to continue Ferris brokering. So that was an exciting. Living here was wonderful. I met my wife, and then this yard didn't work out for multiple reasons. As I said, the Bayou Steel arrangement changed, so before I knew we'd sell the scrapyard, I asked my wife to marry me and took her to Iowa for 6 years. So worked there, and while I was there, after we had our son Alex being a baby, Rob said, "Run the scrapyard in Dubuque for a year, train a guy named Mark," and while I was there, I noticed pretty quickly that Dawn should have been the manager, not Mark, because Dawn, and I can say Dawn like Cher, everyone knows Dawn. I don't have to say her last name on there, but she's just Dawn. But she could do like 3 things at once. She was the scale person, secretary, but she also was timing how long someone took to load the trucks. She could understand 5 things at once in an amazing way. So I just had to give a little call out to Dawn.
All right. Which one's Dawn?
Dawn is in the back left corner.
Right on, Dawn. All right. So.
And then back to St. Louis later on. We moved there.
So when you wake up in the morning, do you know where you are? Or
No clue.
Okay. So look, you've had tremendous success, and you've had some disappointments along the way. Share with us a disappointment, Jeff, if you would, of something that looked great and, but when you got into it, maybe just didn't pan out, and what did you learn from that?
I'd echo what Rich said. The New Orleans yard, was a notable effort and made a lot of sense at the time when we got into it. The pieces just never quite aligned, and it's hard to be buying domestic scrap here for a domestic consumer and competing against a guy who's selling an export product. It's just different animals, and they can only go so far. And I remember Jake Barnes at the time when I asked him, what do we do about, how do we fix this yard? He says, get one big padlock, throw away the key. And it turned out to be right. It was unfortunate, we tried.
Rob, what about you? Any recollection of something that might have been a disappointment for you?
Well, certainly the New Orleans yard, we had high hopes for that. But you live and learn, you try something, and as long as you learn from your mistakes, it's tuition. If you don't learn from them, then you got problems. But there was a couple acquisitions that, in retrospect, that if I would have stepped up, was comfortable with a little bit more money, some of those would have made a big difference to us today. But you can't hit them all right, and you do the best you can, and you stay disciplined. It's the one thing that really impacts growth. I mean, if you go out to buy a company, you can fix almost anything except overpaying. So that there's been a few of those mistakes, but nothing major, nothing that would kill us. So apparently,
was it the old adage that we've all were taught growing up in this industry? It's not what you sell it for; it's what you pay for.
Yeah.
What you buy, huh?
Yep.
Well, all right. So
I want to. Can I add one on that topic?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the other way of looking at it, was when Rob mentioned it, was the ethanol business that we were going to get into. So we hired Doug Reisdorfer, who was a manager of an ethanol plant, a great guy. We had all the engineering done on property we had. We had a grain company to feed it, but we had construction people starting. And then Errol Mellick, the head of our grain company, and I attended a conference, saw ethanol prices were going down, natural gas prices, ethanol was going up. The risk-reward ratio didn't happen. I really, really wanted this business to happen and expand, but I also didn't want to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
And we were one of the leaders in the industry, ethanol industry, in not going bankrupt.
There you go.
Several did.
All right, so your mother played an important role in something that's important to everybody in every yard, and that's safety. And there is an award that you've named, the Rini Award, after your mother. So somebody here, tell us about, Jeff, let's start with you. Tell us about your mother and her involvement in safety and how all these years later it becomes important to the whole company in every fabric of it.
Well, she was always well-grounded and always advised us don't do anything stupid. So I think that was a good place to start, and I'll let you take it from there.
Well, we may have done a couple stupid things over the years, hopefully without many witnesses. Now, Mom, she was very caring. We'd go to the yard in the morning. She wanted to make sure we had all of our fingers when we came back. She was impactful. When I was about 3 or 4 years old, I remember getting in the car, I'm getting in the back seat, and she asked me a question. I forgot what it was, but I said like a little white lie or something. She turned around, and I'd never seen a conniption fit before, but her face split and fire shot from her eyes, and I have not been able to tell a lie since. It's true. I mean, I may not tell you everything I know, but I can't lie. It's really strange, but no, she was a very loving person, and the scrap came from her father. Her maiden name was Alter, and that's where it came from. So she was an amazing lady.
So along with safety, Rich, will go to you on this. Gold coins. Your father gave out gold coins for performance and safety awards. Tell us a little bit about that.
He wanted to respect the achievements related to performance, related to safety at events such as this. For both, at the time, way back when, he did it for both the barge company and the scrap company together, and it was a way of providing recognition to those that were successes. in their achievements.
Well, you know, in episode 2 of Repurposed, I use a gold coin as an analogy for no one would call a gold coin, you know, junk or waste or trash. And it's really apropos now all these years to hear about this, because the gold coin is the ultimate recycled metal, if you will, to give somebody. Copper and aluminum and stainless and iron, we all got that and it has all value, but I think the gold coin is symbiotic to the ultimate quality of what you're doing in this particular industry.
It's also generally something you hold on to, like a trophy, but you know if you want to, you can, you know, spend it.
So there's another award in the company. It's called the Rosie Award. Who wants to tell us about the Rosie Award?
Well, it's, as you know, you need mentors in life. You know, I tell kids that are just starting out, maybe just get out of college, don't worry about your paycheck. I mean, have enough to live on, but don't worry about it. Find the best mentors you can, and that will set you up for life. And Rosie, well, he's still, I don't want to say was, because he's still very much alive. Still a phenomenal friend, but he taught maybe a third of the people in the room. You know, I mean, we would run everybody through Rosie's yard, and Rosie and his people, you know, just did a phenomenal job in breaking them in. Cale, I mean, how many people here were impacted by Rosie?
Yeah, you're right.
Not bad.
Not bad.
In fact, when Rosie and I first met Jay, we were walking later on, like a couple of days, a week later, we were talking, he goes, you know, Rob, you need a COO. I said, yeah, I know, I suck at details. And he says, that's the guy. And so yeah, I said, Jay raised his hand because, you know, I'm the one who signed the paper, but I think Rosie probably hired him.
Well, no wonder you name an award after him.
Well, so yeah, exactly. So we want to encourage everybody to be mentors.
I think that's, you know, that's, again, going back to your company culture. The fact that people are willing to mentor other people to be the best they can and not worry about the success, that somebody might have success because they got mentored properly. Again, it's a testimony to your success and all your company altogether. So your father retires, and then one day he comes to you brothers and says, I'm coming out of retirement. We're going to do some gaming, casinos on the river, Isle of Capri. All right, I got to know what that conversation was like. Share with us what that was like.
We had, there was a GI case plant down on the river with a mile of riverfront underneath the Interstate 74 bridge, flood protected. They had all these big old buildings, and back then, as related to what Jimmy Carter did with the grain embargo, a lot of these companies were going broke. Between that and a lot of them had some unbelievably ridiculous union contracts. So this place closed, and I went over it to try and buy it. My father says, you can't buy it cheap enough. I said, okay. Well, we bought it cheap enough and left the environmental with them. These buildings were so big, I got up to 60 miles an hour inside in a Buick. And,
you were testing the speed limit inside of it.
Exactly.
I got it.
I was looking to see how many misspellings, words there were in the graffiti, you know, as I flew past. At the time, there's a couple legislators that were from the Quad Cities that were trying to pass Riverboat Gaming. And really, it was a tourism bill with a small casino to pay the way. So I talked to Dad, I said, listen, you know, why don't we try and support these guys getting this bill passed, because we can lease this out to a gaming guy, way better than turn it into some kind of an industrial park. He said, well, it'll never happen, go ahead. So an attorney, Kurt Beeson, and I spent a lot of time in Des Moines lobbying, and we got the bill passed. And while we're doing that, it took on some, you know, it looked like it was going to happen, Dad got involved in the lobbying. And, you know, Dad cut a pretty big swath, if you will. And it really resonated with a lot of the legislators. When we brought him in to tell them what we're to expect and what we were going to do, carried a lot of weight. So while we're doing that, we're trying to find a guy, a gaming guy that could be our tenant or maybe a partner. And we had these guys coming out from Vegas, and they had the sharkskin suits and the hair greased back. And they said, listen, we'll be partners, He says, you put up all the money and we'll take half the profits. We're like, So at that time, our father, he'd retired because he'd had a heart attack, had like a quadruple bypass. But that would have been a number of years in the past, and he was bored. And so he came back, he sat 3 of us down, well, 4 of our brother-in-law was still with us at the time. And he said, what do you think about us going into the business? And I said, well, Dad, you told us, when I was a little kid, I wanted to run a motel, He says, if you do that, start as a bellboy and work your way up, and don't just walk in there like you own the place. And so I said, Dad, what about that conversation? He said, the only place to gamble between Atlantic City and Nevada is going to be here in Davenport, here in the Quad Cities. We got room to make mistakes. And so off we went, and he hired a bunch of guys mostly out of Atlantic City. And so at the time, that's when I moved to become president of the scrap company. So while I was a board member of the gaming company, I was, my focus was scrap, as it had to be. And but it was fun. It was a real heady time. Of course, with the limits in Iowa, then all of a sudden Illinois opened up without limits. We started losing a ton of money, and so we had to do something. So we basically, Dad was the father of Riverboat Gaming. We opened the first boat in the country, the first boat in Iowa. We were the first to leave Iowa, and because we got a license in Biloxi, and there were no limits in Biloxi. You didn't have to cruise, and it just took off like wildfire. We had lines like over a mile long, and we were taking food and water out to the people in line because once we had capacity, it was.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Jeff or Rich, whichever want to jump in here. This is part of Alter, the Goldstein family giving back. Hurricane Katrina was horrible. And you have this Riverboat casino in Biloxi, yet you used it to help the community. Jeff, why don't you tell us about that?
When Katrina went through, as many of you know, it totally destroyed major chunks of housing stock along the coast, the Gulf Coast. And we had people, especially in the Biloxi casino, that couldn't find a place to live closer than an hour and a half or 2 hours away, like up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. So Dad started asking around, what is it we can do, or how do we help with this housing problem? And I think he was talking with some of the contractors that we use on the Isle Hotel and such, who steered him to a fellow named Jim Bergman, who was doing affordable housing. And so we got hooked up with Jim, and I was the lead guy on that project, where we ended up finding some land down in Gulfport, not far from Biloxi, the next town over. And we were able to negotiate to buy a nice chunk of land and put up about 340 modest homes, affordable homes, using tax credit financing to help keep the cost low. And that worked out to be a great success, because you're talking about middle income people, police, fire, nurse, teachers, whatever, and giving them a nice community and an opportunity to buy that house at the end of a certain amount of years. And it worked out great. In fact, we got to a point where we just sold that project to another partner of ours just about 2 months ago. But that was a great success.
So let's go further past that. You guys have a foundation, and you deal with hospitals and research. Tell us about it.
It started out actually, the roots of it started way back when my dad's younger brother and a family crashed out in their private plane out in Colorado, long back in 73, 72 or so, and they helped fund a search and rescue operation, and ended up developing something called the Civilian Search and Rescue, I think it was called.
Yes.
Program was the first charity, I guess, that they set up, or foundation. Years go by, and after the sale of the barge line and some other things, we started funding our family foundation, and we do help community development. We don't develop communities, healthcare in the communities, as well as education in communities, and as well as other medical causes, and it's done well. We try to do good for those that need good.
Well, that's incredible because you guys are giving back. You've had much success, and you're giving back to the communities, and that's to be applauded. All right, so let's talk about the industry for a second. A little bit of time left here. We're doing well. A lot of consolidation out there, and a lot of big company, you know, commercial, SA, Schnitzer, and all these kind of buying up a lot of facilities. What's your opinion on consolidation? Is it overheated, or is this what we are going to be used to in this industry throughout North America?
I think there's going to continue to be consolidation, and I think you'll end up with some really big guys and some really small guys. And the guys in the middle, there'll be a few of them, but there won't be as many of them around. And in a way that's sad. I mean, I'm going to go to scrap index this year. I skipped the last 2 or 3 of them. So I walked around, I didn't know anybody. We used to know everybody in the place. And they'd either been bought out or we bought them out. So it's interesting. I walk around with Michael, and he knows way more people than I do, Most of them look like my father said that when he hadn't been to one in a long time, and he came to one, and I said, so you see anybody you know? He says, yeah, I saw everybody I know. But they didn't look exactly right, because they were all the kids of the people that he knew. But it's an industry that when I took a look at the company, we were with 8 yards. Our father always said he wanted to be the best, not the biggest. And we all agree with that. But we needed to get a little bit more throw weight. When you're a small yard, you got people, they control your business more than you do almost. And so with size, now we get respect from some of the steel mills that, would used to crush us under their heel like a cigarette butt. And now they can't do that anymore. And then now with the new effort on decarbonization, scrap is the best way to make steel from an environmental point of view. So it's nice to know we're not making buggy whips. I ask myself that every time we do an acquisition, particularly the bigger ones. It's like, is this a good thing, or are we going down the wrong direction? And every time, in fact, probably more now than even the past couple of years.
So with new mills coming online in the southern states, southern part of the U.S., you're seeing, for our industry, and for Alter for that matter, great opportunity. Yeah. So your people need to know that you guys see there's great opportunity out there, right?
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. We've positioned the company well. We've got tons of cash. We're to go. I'm kind of like looking forward to a recession. We can buy some more people. When I like to say, when scrap is high, we buy scrap. When scrap is low, we buy competitors. So it's
all right. Well, that
pretty high tech, I know.
Yeah. Well, it works though. But sometimes keeping it simple is the best way to handle it. And the fact that Alter's positioned for whatever's coming down, be it a recession, be it continued growth, I think everybody in this room, it's got to feel pretty good to hear the news from the brothers themselves that, hey, Alter's in the best position possible. So, you got a lot of great people in here. People
yes,
are,
we do.
But it's also probably the biggest commodity missing in the marketplace. Everybody wants people. So what are you guys going to do to develop, what's the strategy at Alter to help develop more people? At some point, some of the people in this room are going to retire, and you got to replace them, and you're going to grow. So what's the plan?
I think those people that are going to retire are pretty hard to replace. We could put somebody else in that position, but I don't think I would use the word replace. We've been doing that. We've been working hard on succession plans at all levels of the company, and putting together mentors. It's what we have to do, and we all hope to think that the culture, the honesty, integrity, respect, is what will keep people here. Because a lot of companies don't do that. We've had a number of people who've left, and came back like a year later, like, so would you take me back, please? And,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Depends on what the deal is, but it's all we can do is just keep bringing people in, give them a chance, give them support, you know, to be the best them that they can be.
Excellent. All right, a little fun here. Going to bring this in for a landing here. But yesterday we were talking, you guys have this propensity to paint things. You got Big Bernie, the big peace sign. Jeff, you want to jump in on this one, or Rich, or whoever?
I don't remember painting anything.
Or is this you, Rob?
Truck boxes, sorry.
Yeah, roll-off boxes. Then we painted the old American pulverizer turning crusher that used to be in Davenport.
Oh, yeah.
And we painted a big yellow peace sign on the side of it.
That's right, I forgot that.
And the thing is, the machine had been shut down for a long time, and it stayed shut down for a long time until we cut it up. But yeah, but for about 4 or 5 years, there was a big yellow peace sign when you walk in.
You're right.
It was late 60s, early 70s, you know. Peace out.
And Big Bernie still exists today?
Yeah. I mean,
Where's Big Bernie at? What yard?
Council Bluffs,
Council Bluffs.
you bet.
I think the sign is still there. I think we were upgrading the shredder, the shear, but the sign is still there. That was a surprise for Dad. Jake Barnes, who was an amazing man and ran that yard, he put the sign up because he knew my father would be embarrassed and not want it. And that's true.
All right, well, let's bring this into a landing. Gentlemen, incredible. I've enjoyed this. I'm hoping everyone out there enjoyed it as well. Final thoughts. We're going to start with the oldest brother, Jeff. Final thoughts that you would like to communicate to your people and to somebody who needs to know something.
Well, I think this is great that we're able to get everybody back together again. I haven't been to one, it's been 4 or 5 years since I was at one as well. So, and you know, get to see the folks I've known and meet some folks that I didn't know. I commented to a couple of people here that the definition for me of an old timer here is somebody that I know.
Fantastic. Rob?
Well, I'm honored. I mean, the people in this room are just amazing. They work together, they respect each other, and no one's afraid to say what's on their mind, and they shouldn't be, you know. And as I said last night, and look at the age group. Yeah, we got a fairly young age. I mean, I'll probably ask HR to figure that out. Michelle, you can tell us what the average age is. But you know, it's important. This industry has been hurting for people for a long time, and I look at this group. I'm like, this is fantastic. I mean, we're setting up for like the next 10, 20 years, and you know, the future is incredibly bright. Not only primarily because of the people in this room, and a little help from the decarbonization effort. So we're in the right place at the right time, and you guys are the right people.
Rich?
Yes, and I echoed those sentiments, and I did neglect to say that even though we did have problems with an ethanol plant, at least I saw Merritt and Doug Reisdorfer back there, and I thought he could be a great yard manager, and before he knew it. And then, of course, I had other mentors throughout the company like Don Martin and many others that have been wonderful throughout the time. And that's what makes this organization, which is going to last. And I look forward to being here for the 150th anniversary.
Amen.
Well, there's your time limit. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been a Sierra International Machinery original audio series. Thanks for listening. Please share this podcast and make sure to subscribe.